I called 911 3 times before I realized the police weren't coming. The walls of my Boston studio were thin enough to hear everything: the screams, the begging, the silence that followed. I pressed my palms against the plaster at 2 in the morning, feeling it pulse with bass and violence. And I made a choice that night that would unravel everything I thought I knew about survival, about myself, about the difference between saving someone and destroying your own life in the process. I'd been a trauma nurse for 6 years. I'd seen gunshot wounds and overdoses and bodies so broken I had nightmares about the sounds they made. But I'd never heard anything like the screaming coming through my wall, raw and animal and wrong in a way that made my hands shake as I dialed again. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone being hurt. Next door. I can hear, ma'am, we have units in the area. They're responding to multiple calls. How long? I can't give you an exact time, which meant never, which meant someone had made a call, someone who mattered more than whoever was dying 10 feet away from where I stood in my kitchen, still in my scrubs from a double shift, still smelling like antiseptic and other people's blood. I'd lived in this building for 3 months. North End, historic. Expensive in a way I could barely afford, even with the overtime I pulled at Mass General. I'd kept my head down, learned which neighbors nodded hello and which ones looked through you like you were already a ghost. I'd learned that the penthouse on my floor stayed quiet most of the time, except for Friday nights when expensive cars appeared and music played until dawn, and I told myself it wasn't my business what happened behind other people's doors. But that night, standing there with my phone useless in my hand and the screaming suddenly horribly stopping, I couldn't be invisible anymore. I put on my coat over my scrubs. My hands were steady. That's what 6 years in the ER teaches you. How to move toward the emergency when everyone else is running away. How to walk into the worst moment of someone's life and pretend you're not terrified. The hallway fluorescent lights buzzed. The building smelled like old wood and new money. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack through. You will feel so many emotions in this mysterious love story I'm about to tell. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. I knocked. For 3 seconds, nothing. Just the bass still thumping, lower now, almost gentle. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, the kind that make you understand exactly how much danger you're in before the door even opens. When Dominic Castellano opened that door, I understood immediately why the police weren't coming. He filled the door frame, 6'3", maybe 6'4", in tailored black pants and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The shirt had blood on it, not splattered like an accident, sprayed like an argument. His dark hair was pushed back carelessly, still damp like he'd just stepped out of a shower, and his eyes, slate gray, almost colorless in the hallway light, fixed on me with the kind of attention that makes you forget how to breathe. Behind him, I could see marble floors, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor with the city lights reflecting like scattered diamonds. No bodies, no screaming, just jazz playing softly. Miles Davis, I thought stupidly, and the smell of expensive cologne mixing with something metallic that made my nurse brain catalog it automatically. Blood, but cleaned, recent. Someone next door needs help. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Calmer than I had any right to be, standing there in my dirty scrubs with my phone still clutched in one hand like a weapon I didn't know how to use. He leaned against the door frame, studied me like I was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or destroy. Up close, I could see the details. The scar through his left eyebrow, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his shirt clung to his shoulders like it had been made specifically for his body. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, sharp, precise, designed to cut. "There is no next door," he said quietly. "Just you." I should have run. Every instinct I'd honed working in the ER, the ones that told me when a patient was about to code, when a situation was about to turn, when someone was lying about how they got injured, screamed at me to turn around and disappear, to pretend I'd never knocked, to go back to my studio and pack a bag and find somewhere else to live before morning. But I couldn't move. He stepped aside, opening the door wider, and I saw it then. My apartment wall was his apartment wall. The screaming had been coming from inside his place. The noise I'd been hearing for months, the Friday night parties, the bass that shook my coffee off the nightstand, all of it had been happening in a space that shared my bedroom wall. "You heard something that wasn't meant for you," Dominic said. and his voice was soft as a confession, gentle as a threat. Which means you're either very brave or very stupid. Haven't decided which yet. He reached into his pocket and I flinched, couldn't help it, but he only pulled out a key. My apartment key. The one I'd hidden under the mat 3 months ago for emergencies, for when I worked late and needed the super to water my dying succulent. From now on, you live here, where I can see you, where I can keep you safe. He pressed the key back into my palm. His fingers were warm against my frozen skin. Steady. Like he'd done this before, delivered life-changing news with the casual certainty of someone who'd never been told no. From everyone, he continued, including yourself. I looked down at the key, at his hand still covering mine, at the blood on his cuff that he hadn't bothered to hide. I don't understand. You will. He stepped back, and the door started to close. And I realized with sudden, terrible clarity that this was my last chance to pretend. To go back to my studio and convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that the blood was wine, that the screaming had been a television, that Dominic Castellano was just another rich neighbor in a building full of people who didn't want to know each other's stories. But then he paused, the door half closed, and looked at me one more time. Because the people who know what you heard, they don't leave witnesses, Emma. And now you're mine to protect, whether you want to be or not. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the hallway for a long time, holding my apartment key, feeling the bass still thumping through the walls. And I knew, with the same certainty I felt when a patient was bleeding out and there was nothing left to do but cut, that my life had just ended. Or maybe it had just begun. I didn't move into Dominic's penthouse that night. I ran back to my studio, locked every lock, and tried to pretend the last hour hadn't happened. I took a shower hot enough to hurt, made chamomile tea I didn't drink, sat on my bed staring at the wall I now knew connected to his apartment, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. When dawn broke gray and cold over Boston Harbor, I got dressed for my shift. My hands still worked, my brain still functioned. I could compartmentalize. That's what made me good at my job. I told myself this was the same thing, just another emergency to survive. But when I stepped outside my building, there was a man waiting, dark suit, earpiece, standing next to a parking meter like he'd been planted there. He didn't try to hide that he was watching me. Didn't pretend to be on his phone. Just stood there, tracking my movement with professional attention that made my stomach drop. I walked to the T station. He followed. On the red line to Mass General, I saw him 3 cars down. In the hospital lobby, he took a seat near the coffee cart. When I changed into fresh scrubs, I looked out the staff room window and saw a black Mercedes idling in the ambulance bay. You okay, Emma? Marissa, one of the other trauma nurses, was watching me with concern. Fine. Just tired. My shift was supposed to be a relief. 12 hours where I could lose myself in controlled chaos. But I couldn't focus. Started an IV on the wrong vein. Forgot to chart a medication. Called for labs I'd already ordered. Around 11, I took my break in the cafeteria. Got coffee I didn't want. Sat by the window. Tried to figure out what to do. This seat taken. I looked up. Dominic Castellano sat down across from me in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, looking like he belonged in this fluorescent-lit cafeteria the same way a wolf belongs in a henhouse. You can't do this, I hissed. This is kidnapping. This is protection. He said it without looking up from his coffee. Marcus Chen sent 3 men to your building last night. I sent them back in pieces. The casual way he said pieces made something cold settle in my stomach. I didn't ask you to. No. You knocked on my door instead of running. He looked at me. Then, gray eyes impossibly clear. You involved yourself. Now I'm involved back. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. In my world, Emma, there are only 2 kinds of people. The ones I protect and the ones I eliminate. You chose which one when you cared about a stranger screaming. Around us, the cafeteria continued its normal rhythm, but everything had changed. I have a life, I said. A job. A family. You can't just... Your supervisor received a call this morning from the hospital's largest donor. Your shift schedule is being adjusted for your safety. Your landlord received notice that your lease is terminated, but you've been offered comparable housing. Your car has new tires because the old ones were slashed last night. He rattled off each violation like a list of accomplishments. Everything is being handled. All you have to do is let me... And if I don't want to be taken care of? Something flickered across his face. Exhaustion? Maybe. Then you'll be dead by Thursday. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and looked down at me. The man in my apartment was Marcus Chen's accountant, giving me names, locations, evidence. He was screaming because he was a coward who sold out his own people, and he knew what happens to cowards in my world. Dominic pulled out his phone, showed me a photograph. My car, taken this morning, 5 words spray-painted in red. She saw, she dies next. You weren't supposed to be real, he said quietly. You were supposed to be another neighbor who knew to mind her business, but you knocked. And now you're the message Chen wants to send. He walked away before I could respond. I lasted 4 more hours before the anger broke through the fear. My shift ended at 7. I bypassed Marco, the man following me, and took the staff exit through the morgue. Caught a cab to Dominic's building, walked past the doorman who clearly expected me, took the private elevator to the penthouse. He was on his balcony, shirt sleeves, smoking a cigarette, staring out at the city like a king surveying his kingdom. I'm not moving in, I said. I'm not your responsibility. You're in my world now. He didn't turn around. And my world has rules. You broke them by caring when you should have stayed silent. So punish me for being a decent person. I protect people. He took a drag of his cigarette. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. He finally turned, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Resignation. The look of someone who'd played this scene before. 3 days ago, someone spray-painted a message on your car. You didn't see it because my people cleaned it before you woke up. He showed me another photo. My Honda. Pre-dawn darkness. The same red words. That was the first warning. The slashed tires were the second. Marco is mine. My head of security. The men Chen sent are less obvious. He swiped to another photo. A young woman, Asian, smiling. Lily Nguyen, waitress in Chinatown. Saw Chen's people conducting business. Told her manager she was calling the police. They found her in the harbor 2 days later. Another swipe. Another woman. Karen Winters. Ada. Building a case against Chen's trafficking operation. Someone shot her in her apartment. I can show you 15 more, Dominic said quietly. 15 women in the last 5 years who thought being innocent mattered. He stepped closer. You weren't supposed to be real, Emma. But you knocked. And now you're the message Chen wants to send. So what do? You let me protect you. Move in here where I can see you. Where my people can watch every door, every window. That's not protection. That's a prison. It's both. He didn't flinch from the truth. But it's the only way you survive. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something changed in his face. A crack in the armor. He turned the phone toward me. A photo of Rachel's house in Newton. The little colonial with blue shutters where my sister lived with her 7-year-old daughter. Recent. The timestamp read 7:43 p.m. Below it, a text. They have your sister's address, your niece's school schedule. 1 hour to decide. Your freedom or their lives. I moved into the penthouse that night with a duffel bag and a heart full of hate. Dominic had my things brought over by morning. My books, my photos, even the stupid succulent I'd been killing slowly on my windowsill. Someone had watered it. The leaves looked greener than they had in months, like even my dying plant got better care in his world than it did in mine. He'd given me the guest suite. All glass and chrome and a bed big enough for 4 people, positioned so I could see the harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of view people paid millions for. The kind of view that made you feel like you owned the city instead of the city owning you. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the lights, red and white streaking across the Zakim Bridge, planes descending toward Logan, the steady pulse of a city that kept moving whether you were drowning or not. My phone stayed dark. Dominic had taken it, replaced it with a new one that had 3 contacts, him, Marco, and 911. Like those were the only people who mattered now. Like my entire life could be reduced to emergencies and the man who controlled them. Rachel was safe. That's what Marco had told me when he'd picked me up from the hospital, speaking in the calm, professional tone of someone who'd delivered this kind of news before. Your sister and niece are in a secure location. Mr. Castellano has people watching them. They don't know they're being watched. They think they're just visiting your aunt in Portland for a few days. I didn't have an aunt in Portland, but Rachel did now, apparently, complete with a backstory and a reason for the sudden trip and probably surveillance photos to prove it. Dominic's world didn't just protect. It invented, manipulated, rewrote reality until the lie became safer than the truth. When dawn broke over the harbor, I found Dominic in his office. He was still dressed from the night before. Same shirt, same pants. But the shirt was unbuttoned now, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms roped with muscle and a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. He was surrounded by papers and laptop screens showing security feeds. Camera angles of my sister's house. Empty now. The hospital parking garage. My old apartment building. A grid of surveillance that proved he'd been watching everything, everyone, long before I'd knocked on his door. Where are they? I stood in the doorway, not entering. Not yet. Some part of me still believed if I didn't cross the threshold into his office, I could pretend this was temporary. That I hadn't just traded my freedom for my family's safety. Somewhere safe. He didn't look up. Somewhere Chen can't touch. I want to talk to Rachel. No. The flatness of it made something crack inside me. She's my sister. She deserves to know. What? That you witnessed something you shouldn't have? That I'm keeping her daughter alive by making her think she's on vacation? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from not sleeping for days. She deserves normal, Emma. I'm giving her that. By lying to her. By keeping her breathing. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us wanted to say. Outside, the city was waking up. Traffic building. People heading to jobs where the worst thing that might happen was a bad commute or a difficult email. Normal problems. Normal lives. I'd never get that back. Tell me the rules, I said finally. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Not quite approval, but close. Recognition, maybe, that I was smart enough to understand how this worked. You don't leave this penthouse without Marco. You don't contact anyone without clearing it with me first. You don't ask questions about what you see or hear in this apartment. He stood up, walked around the desk, and I realized how tall he was, how much space he occupied, how the room seemed to shrink around him. Break any of them, and I can't protect you. Break all three, and you're dead by morning. And what's my rule? He raised an eyebrow, surprised, maybe, that I was negotiating. You get one rule, Dominic. One thing you have to give me, or this doesn't work. I stepped into the office then, crossing that invisible line, committing to whatever this was. His eyes tracked the movement. Truth, I said. I ask you a direct question, you give me a direct answer. No more lies. No more you're safe for not knowing. I'm already in this. Let me see it clearly. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then something shifted in his face, a crack in the armor that let me see underneath. Not the Mafia boss, not the man who sent people back in pieces. Just someone tired and alone and maybe, possibly, relieved that someone was asking him to be honest. One truth per day, he said, and you have to be sure you want the answer before you ask. I nodded. First question, how many people have you killed? I expected him to dodge, to redirect, to laugh and tell me that wasn't how this worked. Instead, he held my gaze and said, 17, 6 in self-defense, 3 to protect my sister, 8 because they were going to do worse to people who couldn't protect themselves. He paused, and something haunted moved through his eyes. And 1 because I was 23 and stupid and thought proving myself mattered more than mercy. The raw honesty of it stole my breath. Made me understand that truth was a weapon too. Maybe the most dangerous one he had. Do you regret it? That's your second question. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You don't get it until tomorrow. But something in his voice told me the answer anyway. Not all of them. Just the last one. The days blurred together after that. Marco drove me to the hospital for shifts Dominic personally approved. Day shifts only, never nights, always with an escort waiting in the parking garage. My coworkers noticed, whispered. Sarah from radiology asked if I was in trouble. I lied and said I was fine. I'd never been a good liar before. I was learning. The penthouse became its own kind of routine. Dominic worked late, slept little, moved through the space like a ghost haunting his own life. Some mornings I'd find him on the balcony, smoking and staring at the city. Some nights I'd hear him on the phone, speaking in Italian or rapid-fire English, his voice hard and cold and nothing like the way he spoke to me. We circled each other carefully. Two people sharing a space but not a life, until the night I found him on the balcony at 3 a.m., and without thinking, I brought him coffee. He looked surprised when I handed him the mug. Then something else? Softer? Almost vulnerable? Couldn't sleep? Never can, I admitted. Too quiet. In my apartment, I could hear everything. My neighbors fighting, music, the tea rumbling underground. Here it's just silence. You miss the noise? I miss feeling like part of the world. He took a sip of coffee, and we stood there in the November cold, not touching, not speaking. Just two insomniacs watching the city sleep. It felt like the most honest moment we'd shared. "My turn for a question?" I said. "Why does Marcus Chen want you dead?" Dominic was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I wouldn't let him win." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have tonight. His phone lit up on the glass table. He glanced at it, and his whole body went rigid, every muscle locking, every easy line of his posture transforming into something coiled and dangerous. He picked up the phone, stared at the screen, and when he looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. He turned the phone toward me without a word. A photo of a young woman, beautiful, dark-haired, laughing at something off camera. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe, sunlight catching her hair, and she looked so alive it hurt to see. Below the image, a single word in all caps. Rosalind. Who is she? Dominic's hand was shaking. Actually shaking. "My sister," he said, his voice hollowed out. "And she's been dead for 3 years. The coffee mug slipped from my hand. I didn't hear it shatter. Didn't register the hot liquid or Marco appearing with his hand on his weapon. All I could see was the photo on Dominic's phone. The woman laughing. The timestamp reading yesterday. "That's impossible," I said. Dominic was already moving, barking orders into his phone in Italian, his whole body transformed. Not the careful man who brought me truths. The other one, the one who sent people back in pieces. Marco pulled me inside, and suddenly there were men everywhere. Emerging from rooms I didn't know existed, checking weapons with casual efficiency. The penthouse became a war room in seconds. "Emma, stay here." Dominic didn't look at me. Was already pulling on a jacket, checking a gun. "No." He turned, and the look on his face should have scared me. "She's been dead for 3 years, I said. "You told me. So either that photo is fake, or you've been lying, and I deserve to know which. Emma, truth. That's my rule. You gave it to me. So tell me, is your sister alive or dead?" The silence was complete. I could hear the wind. Marco shifting, Dominic's breathing, fast, shallow. "I don't know," he said finally, and the admission seemed to cost everything. He sat heavily on the couch, still holding his phone. I sat next to him, not close, but close enough. The way I'd sit with family members in the ER when delivering bad news. "Tell me about her." Why? Because whoever sent this wants you off balance. And the only way to fight that is to remember what's true. Dominic looked at me. Really looked. Like seeing me for the first time. "Rosa was 2 years younger," he said quietly. "Wanted to be a teacher. Volunteered at a women's shelter in Dorchester. She was good. Pure. Everything I wasn't. He showed me another photo, them together, younger, happier, him smiling in a way I'd never seen. I was building something legitimate, getting out. She was my reason for doing it right. What happened? Marcus Chen wanted my territory. I said no. So he took the one thing I loved more than power. His voice had gone flat, empty. They sent me videos for 5 days, asking me to sign over my operations, showing me what they were doing to her. I reached for his hand without thinking, felt him grip my fingers. On the 6th day, they sent her body, with a note that said she screamed my name. The rawness sat between us. I found all 15 men who touched her, made them call Chen before they died. Then I built an empire strong enough that no one could ever touch anyone I loved again. But someone just did. He looked at the photo. The woman alive. If Rosa's alive, if she's been alive this whole time. He didn't finish. I understood. 3 years of grief. 3 years of violence. all based on a body in a box. We need to verify, I said. The photo could be old, photoshopped, or she's alive and I've been killing people in her name while she was breathing somewhere. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Put it on speaker. Emma Grace. A woman's voice. Cultured. Amused. You knocked on the wrong door. Who is this? Someone who knows what your boyfriend is capable of. Someone who watched him torture my people. Dominic's face went white. Where's Rosa? Laughter. Bright and cruel. Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe she's alive. Maybe you've been too busy building your empire to look for her. What do you want? Everything you love, destroyed. Starting with the pretty nurse who thinks she can save you. The line went dead. Dominic was on his feet, issuing orders, trace the call, double security, find information about Chen's family. Stop, I said. This is what they want. You spinning out while they... I stopped, pulled up my phone, found what I was looking for. 3 months ago, I admitted a Jane Doe, early 20s, Chinese, nearly beaten to death. She gave a description of attackers and disappeared from the system. I showed him the intake photo. Dominic zoomed in on a small tattoo on her wrist, a Chinese character. I've seen that before, he said slowly. In surveillance footage of Rosa's abduction, on one of the guards. He looked at me. What if Rosa wasn't the only target? I asked. What if whoever took her was recruiting, using the shelter as a hunting ground? The lights went out, not just the penthouse, the entire building. Through the windows, I could see the street going dark block by block. Marco's voice came from the darkness. Multiple vehicles. East entrance. Dominic's hand found mine. Emma, whatever happens, you stay with Marco. You don't ask questions. You run. What about you? I'm going to find out who's playing with my sister's ghost. Something crashed downstairs. Gunfire, sharp and close. Dominic pulled me toward a hidden door in his office. Opened it to reveal a stairwell. Marco will take you to a safe house. No. Your sister worked at a shelter. That Jane Doe came to my ER. What if I'm not random? What if I'm part of this because someone wanted me to be? The gunfire was getting closer. Marco was shouting about the exit being compromised. Dominic looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood. The Jane Doe's file, he said. Where is it? Hospital records. But I remember her face. The way she looked at me when I asked about pressing charges. What did she say? He can't save everyone. Some of us are already dead. Dominic's expression shifted. That's a Chen family motto. What they tell the women they recruit. More gunfire. The smell of smoke. We have to go, Marco said. Now. But Dominic was looking at me with something like trust. Can you identify her? If I get you access to Chen's operations? Yes. Even if it means seeing things you can't unsee? I thought about Rosa. About the women in his photos. About my sister and niece. Especially then. He nodded, grabbed a bag, pulled me toward the stairwell. We disappeared into the dark with gunfire echoing behind us. At the bottom, Dominic's phone lit up. Another photo. Rosa, if it was Rosa, holding today's newspaper. Very much alive. And a text. She says hi. Brother. Says you should have looked harder. Says Emma reminds her of someone she used to trust. Then, want to know who really killed me. The safe house was a lie. Marco drove us to South Boston in something anonymous, a Ford that blended into traffic. Dominic sat in the back with me, his phone casting blue light across his face, jaw tight enough to crack. We didn't speak. The silence had weight now, like air before a thunderstorm. The house was a triple-decker where people minded their business out of survival. Peeling paint, broken steps. Inside was different. Reinforced doors, hidden cameras, enough weapons to start a war. You'll stay here tonight? Dominic said, not looking at me. Marco will be outside. Don't open the door. Don't use your phone. Come with me. He turned to her and I saw exhaustion carved into his face. Grief hollowing him out. I need to find her, he said. If Rosa's alive, then she's been alive for 3 years while you tore Boston apart. While Chen built an empire on your rage. Don't you think that's strange? I moved closer. Dominic didn't retreat. What if finding her is exactly what they want? Then I'll deal with that. You'll walk into a trap, get killed. And I'll be left here waiting for men who already know where I am. Something shifted in his expression. What are you suggesting? That Jane Doe I treated. She didn't disappear by accident. Someone with access to hospital records helped her vanish. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd kept. I remember her now. She came in on a Friday, late shift, beaten badly, but the injuries were wrong, too precise, like someone knew exactly how much damage to do without killing her. Dominic studied the woman's face. She told me something while I stitched her up. In Mandarin, probably thinking I wouldn't understand. What did she say? Forgive me, sister. I didn't know he would kill you too. Dominic sat heavily on the couch, and for the first time he looked small, breakable. Rosa trusted everyone. He said quietly. That's what got her killed. She believed people were fundamentally good. She'd bring home stray cats and traumatized women, give them food in her belief they could be better. He looked at the photo. The night they took her, she'd called me, said there was a new woman at the shelter who needed help, asked if I could arrange transportation. I said no, said it was too risky. We fought. He pressed his palms against his eyes. That was the last time I spoke to her. Angry, telling her she was being naive. And then it happened. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching. Outside, South Boston waking up, garbage trucks, car alarms, the ordinary sounds of a city that kept moving. What if the woman at the shelter was your Jane Doe? Dominic asked. What if Rosa died trying to save someone who was setting her up? The pieces fell into place, a puzzle made of grief and betrayal. I need to go back to the hospital, I said. Access the full records, security footage, intake forms. Too dangerous. Then they'll see a nurse going to work. I'll use the staff entrance. Stay public, act normal. Normal, Dominic repeated, something like a laugh escaping him. Dark and broken. You don't know how to do normal anymore. Neither of us do. He was right. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Then teach me how to do dangerous, I said. Teach me how to survive your world instead of hiding from it. Dominic looked at me like he was seeing something that scared him. You don't want to learn that. I knocked on your door. I involved myself. Stop protecting me from it and let me help end this. Finally, Dominic made a call. It's me. I need access to Mass General's security system, tonight. Everything from 3 months ago. A pause. And send someone to pick up Dr. Sarah Chen. Tell her it's about her sister. Tell her Emma Grace wants to talk about the patient she erased. He hung up, looked at me. Dr. Chen is Marcus Chen's niece, head of hospital records. She's been cleaning up his messes for years. My stomach dropped. I've worked with her. She's been on my floor dozens of times. Watching you, learning your patterns, making sure you stayed useful. The betrayal was physical, made my hands shake. Why me? Because you're good at your job. Because you care. Because 3 months ago, you spent 4 hours trying to save a Jane Doe everyone else had written off. Dominic started pacing. They were testing you, seeing if you'd notice inconsistencies, ask questions, if you'd be someone who couldn't ignore something wrong. And when I knocked on your door, you proved you were exactly what they needed. A witness who couldn't stay silent, and someone who might lead them to the one thing I've been protecting, your sister, my mother. The word landed like a gunshot. Rosa wasn't the only person at that shelter. My mother was there too, hiding from the family business, helping women. She was the federal witness Chen wanted, the one with testimony to bring down his operation. He showed me another photo, a woman in her 50s, elegant, smiling. Rosa died protecting her. Took a bullet meant for our mother and told her to run. I've spent 3 years making sure Chen never finds out she's alive. Where is she? Somewhere safe. But if your Jane Doe saw her that night, his phone buzzed. A video file. The footage was grainy, shot from a phone. The Jane Doe, healthier now, speaking in Mandarin. Dominic's face went white. What is she saying? That Rosa's alive. That she's been working with Chen to destroy me from the inside. That everything about that night was a lie to turn me into a monster. The video ended with a final image. Rosa, looking at the camera, alive and whole. And she was smiling, not the smile from family photos. Something else, something that made me understand why Dominic looked like he was watching the world end. A smile that said, "I know what you did, brother, and now it's my turn." Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at the safe house at 4 in the morning. Marco brought her in with a hand on her elbow, not rough, but firm enough to communicate that this wasn't a request. She was smaller than I'd imagined, barely 5 feet in expensive yoga pants and a Patagonia jacket, her hair pulled back in a messy bun like we'd interrupted her sleep. Which we had. But her eyes were sharp, calculating, scanning the room with the kind of professional assessment that told me she'd been in situations like this before. She saw me first. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something else. Fear, maybe, or respect for how thoroughly she'd underestimated me. "Emma," she said, her voice steady despite Marco's presence. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." Dominic stepped from the shadows near the window. He'd been standing there for the past hour, silent and still, watching the street like he could will his sister into existence through sheer force of attention. When Sarah saw him, her composure cracked. "Castellano, I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to bring me here yourself." "Funny," Dominic said, his voice soft as a threat. "I was thinking the same thing about you, that you wouldn't be stupid enough to help your uncle disappear witnesses from my nurse's ER." The tension in the room shifted, became something physical, dangerous. I'd seen Dominic controlled before, watched him give orders, make calls, move through his world with the certainty of someone who'd never been told no. But this was different. This was personal. Sarah sat down on the couch without being asked, crossed her legs, and looked at me like we were having coffee instead of an interrogation. "The Jane Doe from 3 months ago," she said. "You were good with her. Spent 4 hours in surgery, sat with her while she recovered, gave her your personal cell number in case she needed help. Most nurses would have processed the paperwork and moved on. She was dying. She was supposed to die. That was the point. The casualness of it made my stomach turn. Sarah said it the way you'd talk about a failed experiment, a minor inconvenience in a larger plan. Maylin," Sarah continued. "My cousin. Marcus Chen's daughter. She was the one who set up your sister, Dominic. Fed Rosa information about women who needed help. Made sure she was in the right place at the right time. Made sure Rosa trusted her enough to die for her." Dominic's hands clenched at his sides. I saw Marco shift his weight, ready to intervene if this went wrong. "But May got messy," Sarah said. "Started feeling guilty. Started talking about confessing, about telling you the truth. So my uncle decided she needed to disappear. Made it look like a trafficking victim. Sent her to Emma's ER knowing Emma wouldn't let her die." "Why?" I asked. "Why save her if Chen wanted her dead? Because dead daughters are martyrs. But daughters who owe you their lives, those are weapons." Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then held it up. Security footage from the hospital. Me, 3 months ago, younger somehow, more naive, holding Maylin's hand while she cried and whispered things I couldn't understand. "You were the test," Sarah said, looking at me. "If you saved her, if you cared enough to break protocol and keep her alive, then you were the kind of person who'd knock on a door when you heard screaming. The kind of person who'd involve yourself. The kind of person Chen could use against me," Dominic finished. Sarah smiled. "It wasn't warm." "Exactly. My uncle has been planning this for 3 years. Ever since you killed his men. Ever since you built your empire on his territory. He knew he couldn't beat you with violence. You're too good at that. So he decided to beat you with the one thing you can't control, which is your need to save people, your guilt over Rosa, your belief that if you're just strong enough, brutal enough, rich enough, you can protect everyone you love." She stood up, walked to the window where Dominic stood, and I watched something pass between them. Not quite understanding, but recognition. 2 people who'd grown up in the same world, learned the same lessons, made different choices about what to do with that knowledge. "Rosa isn't dead," Sarah said quietly. "But she isn't alive the way you think, either." Dominic grabbed her arm, not gentle. Marco moved forward, but I held up my hand, stopping him. This needed to happen. Whatever truth was about to come out, Dominic needed to hear it without interference. Explain, he said. Now, the woman in the video, the one smiling, that was Rosa 3 years ago, before the abduction. My uncle has been using old footage, Photoshop, deepfakes, anything to make you think she's alive, to keep you destabilized, to make you question everything. But the body was a woman who looked like her. Street addict Chen's people found. Cleaned up. Killed. He sent you Rosa's jewelry, her ID, dental records he'd faked. Made sure you'd believe it completely. Dominic's face had gone white. I'd seen him angry, scared, violent. But this was something else. This was a man watching his entire world reconstruct itself around a lie. Where is she? His voice was barely a whisper. Where's my sister? Sarah's expression shifted, became almost gentle. In a memory care facility in Vermont, early onset Alzheimer's. She doesn't remember the shelter, the abduction, you. Most days she doesn't remember her own name. The silence that followed was complete. Outside, I could hear the city waking up. Delivery trucks, early commuters, the ordinary machinery of a Monday morning. Inside, Dominic was breaking. How long have you known? He asked. 6 months. I found her by accident, following up on a patient transfer. She was listed under your mother's maiden name. And you didn't tell me. I told my uncle, who told me that if I breathed a word to you, he'd kill her for real this time. And your mother, and anyone else you'd ever loved. Sarah looked at me then. Including Emma. He's been watching her since the night she knocked on your door, waiting for the right moment to use her, waiting for you to care enough that losing her would destroy you. Dominic turned to face me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my breath catch. Not love. It was too soon for that. Too complicated. But something close. Care, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The recognition that I'd become someone who mattered in a life where he'd trained himself not to let anyone matter. We need to move your mother, I said, breaking the silence. If Chen knows where Rosa is, he knows where your mother is too. Already done, Sarah said. Transferred her last night to a secure facility. Different name, different records. Chen will figure it out eventually, but it buys you time. Time for what? To decide who you want to be when this is over. She walked to the door, and Marco let her pass. She paused at the threshold, looked back at Dominic. For what it's worth, Rosa loved you. Before the disease took her memories, before everything went wrong, she talked about you constantly. Said you were the best man she knew, even when you were trying to be the worst. Why are you helping me? After everything your family has done. Because Mei Lin is my cousin and my friend, and I'm tired of watching my uncle use the people I love as weapons. Because Emma saved her life when she was supposed to die, and that kind of mercy should matter for something. Sarah left. Marco closed the door behind her, and we stood in the safe house that wasn't safe, with dawn breaking gray and cold over South Boston. Dominic sat down heavily on the couch, put his head in his hands, and for the first time since I'd met him, I watched him cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent tears that tracked down his face while his shoulders shook and he tried to breathe through grief that had been waiting 3 years to surface. I sat next to him. Didn't touch him, didn't speak, just sat there the way I'd sit with patients, families in the ER when the doctor came out with bad news. Present but not demanding. There but not intruding. After a long time, he said, "She doesn't remember me." No. All of this. Everything I built, everyone I killed, the empire I constructed to keep her safe, and she doesn't even know who I am. But she's alive. That has to count for something. Does it? If the person you love doesn't exist anymore, except as a body going through motions, if all you have left is the ghost of who they used to be, I thought about my own life before I knocked on his door. The version of Emma who went to work and came home and kept her head down and believed that staying invisible was the same as staying safe. That version of me didn't exist anymore either. She'd died the moment I chose to care about a stranger's screaming. Maybe, I said slowly, the point isn't whether she remembers you. Maybe it's whether you remember her. The real her. Not the saint you turned her into after she died. Not the ghost Chen used to manipulate you. But the actual person who fought with you and loved you and thought you could be better. Dominic looked at me, and something shifted in his expression. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I started living in a safe house and helping mafia bosses process their trauma. He laughed. Actually laughed. It was brief, broken, but real. Then his phone buzzed. A text from a number we both recognized now. The one that had been sending the photos, the videos, the carefully constructed lies. But this message was different. Just an address in Charlestown. And a time. 6 a.m. Below it, bring Emma, alone. Or your mother dies for real this time. I looked at the clock on the wall. We had 45 minutes. It's a trap, Marco said from his position by the door. Obviously, Dominic replied. So we don't go. We have to go. I stood up, went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Thinner, harder, eyes that had seen too much in too short a time, but also someone who'd made choices, taken stands, refused to stay invisible even when invisibility was safer. When I came out, Dominic was loading a gun. You don't have to do this, he said without looking at me. I can send you somewhere Chen will never find you. Witness protection, new identity, new life. You'd be safe. I'd be alone. You'd be alive. Same thing, I said, for people like us. He looked up then, and I saw him understand what I was saying, that somewhere between the safe house and the lies and the grief, we'd become the same kind of broken. The kind that couldn't walk away from a fight even when walking away was the smart choice. Okay, he said. But if anything goes wrong, you run. You don't try to save me. You don't look back. You just run. Same goes for you. He smiled, and it was almost warm. Deal. We left the safe house at 5:30. Marco drove. Dominic sat next to me in the back, and our hands found each other in the space between us. Not romantic, not sexual. Just two people who'd decided that going into danger together was better than being safe alone. The address was a warehouse near the Navy Yard. Abandoned, industrial, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one called the police because everyone knew the police wouldn't come. The door was unlocked. Inside, Marcus Chen was waiting. Marcus Chen looked nothing like I'd imagined. He was smaller than Dominic, maybe 5'9", wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my nursing school loans. His hair was silver at the temples, perfectly styled, and when he smiled it was the kind of smile that made boardrooms fall silent and empires shift. Reasonable, warm, even. The smile of someone who'd learned that power doesn't always require volume. Emma Grace, he said, like we were old friends meeting for brunch. I've heard so much about you. The warehouse was vast and empty except for a single chair positioned under a skylight, morning sun cutting through the dust like a spotlight. In the chair sat a woman, older, elegant even in restraints, with Dominic's gray eyes and the kind of bone structure that made you understand where his dangerous beauty came from. His mother. Dominic moved forward, but Chen's men appeared from the shadows. 5 of them, maybe 6. Armed but casual about it. The kind of security that comes from absolute confidence. Not yet, Chen said gently. First, we talk. There's nothing to talk about. Dominic's voice was ice. Let her go. But there's so much to discuss. For instance, why your sister is alive but doesn't remember you. Why I've spent 3 years teaching you what it feels like to lose everything. Why Emma is the only person who can save you now. Chen walked closer to me, and I forced myself not to step back. I'd spent 6 years in the ER learning not to flinch when drunk patients swung at me, when drug seekers threatened me, when attending physicians screamed at my mistakes. I'd learned to hold my ground even when every instinct said run. Do you know what Dominic did to earn all this? Chen asked me conversationally. Do you know why I took his sister? Because you wanted his territory. No. Chen's smile widened. Because he killed my daughter. The words landed like a physical blow. I looked at Dominic, waiting for the denial. It didn't come. Lily Chen, Marcus continued, 23 years old, art student, volunteered at the same shelter as Rosa Castellano. They were friends, actually. Rosa was helping Lily get away from me, from the family business. Helping her apply to graduate programs in California where she could disappear and be normal. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. A young woman, beautiful and laughing, standing next to Rosa. They had their arms around each other. Sisters in everything but blood. Dominic's men killed her during a raid on one of my warehouses. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Collateral damage, they called it. That's not what happened, Dominic said, but his voice lacked conviction. No? Then tell Emma what happened. Tell her about the warehouse in Quincy, about the night you decided to send a message to me by burning my operations to the ground. Tell her about the woman you found hiding in the back office and what you did when she begged for her life. The silence stretched. Outside, I could hear the harbor, boats, seagulls, the industrial sounds of a port city waking up. Inside, I watched Dominic's face as he relived something he'd buried. She had a gun, he said finally. Was pointing it at Marco. I didn't know who she was. Didn't know she was just a kid playing bodyguard for her father. I just saw the weapon and You shot her, Chen finished, 4 times. Watched her bleed out on the concrete while you searched the warehouse for evidence against me. She was alive for 6 minutes. Called out for her mother in Mandarin. You didn't even stay to see if she'd survive. I looked at Dominic, really looked at him, and saw the truth written in every line of his body. The guilt he'd been carrying. The reason he'd built an empire strong enough to protect everyone. The reason Rosa's death had broken him so completely. Because Lily Chen had died first. And everything that came after was just the universe balancing the scales. So you took Rosa, I said to Chen. Made him think you'd killed her. Made him spend 3 years becoming a monster while she was actually alive, but lost to a disease he couldn't fight. Poetic, isn't it? Chen looked at Dominic's mother, still silent in the chair. And now I have the one person he has left. The federal witness who could destroy my operations. The mother who abandoned her family to play saint at a women's shelter while her sons built empires on blood. He walked to her, placed a hand on her shoulder almost gently. Here's what's going to happen. Emma is going to choose. She can save Dominic's mother, tell me to release her. And I will. She walks out of here, goes back to her memory care facility, lives out her remaining years in peace. Or, I asked, or she can save Dominic. Tell me to let you both leave, and I will. No pursuit, no revenge. Clean slate, you disappear together, build a life somewhere I'll never look. That's not a choice, Dominic said. That's torture. That's justice, Chen corrected. You made me choose between my daughter and my empire. I chose wrong. Now you get to choose between the woman you love and the mother who made you possible. Let's see if you choose better than I did. My heart was hammering. I looked at Dominic's mother, Sarah. I remembered from the photo. She was awake, watching us with those gray eyes that were so much like her son's. And she was shaking her head. Small movements, but deliberate. She knew what Chen was asking. And she was already choosing. There has to be another way, I said. There isn't, Chen replied. I've spent 3 years engineering this moment. Every variable accounted for. Every exit blocked. The only choice is which person walks out of here alive. I thought about my sister Rachel, safe somewhere with Lily because I'd traded my freedom for theirs. Thought about Rosa, alive but erased by disease. Thought about Lily Chen, 23 years old and bleeding out in a warehouse because she'd been in the wrong place when men like Dominic and Chen played their games of empire and revenge. Thought about all the women who'd been collateral damage in wars they didn't start. What if I choose differently? I asked. Chen raised an eyebrow. Interested now. What if I testify? If Sarah can't remember, but I can document everything I've seen in the last 2 weeks. Hospital records of trafficking victims, evidence of corruption, names and dates, and enough testimony to build a case against you that doesn't require her memory. Emma, no, Dominic said. You'd be dead within a week, Chen said. The moment you stepped into a courtroom, my people would what? Kill a nurse on national television? Make a martyr out of someone the media would love? I was gaining momentum now, seeing the angles. Young woman, caring profession, stood up to organized crime. The optics are terrible for you. Chen studied me with new appreciation. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I knock on doors when I hear people screaming, I said. That takes a special kind of stupid that looks like smart sometimes. Something flickered across Chen's face. Not quite a smile, but close. Respect, maybe. Recognition of someone who understood how the game was played. Counter offer, he said. You testify. I allow it. But Dominic goes to prison for Lily's murder. I have witnesses, Evidence, enough to make it stick. He spends the rest of his life behind bars while you live free and his mother remembers nothing. Or Dominic kills me right now. Marco has a clean shot from the door, I'm sure. My men kill his mother. And you spend the rest of your short life running from my organization while they hunt you both. The choice was impossible. Designed to be impossible. Chen had engineered it so that no matter what happened, someone Dominic loved would be destroyed. That's when Sarah spoke. Her voice was rough from disuse, but clear. Stronger than anyone expected. Let me tell you about my daughter. Everyone turned. Chen's smile faltered. Rosa used to bring me flowers. Sarah continued, her eyes focused on something we couldn't see. Daisies. Every Sunday after Mass. She'd sit with me at the shelter and tell me about the women she'd helped that week. The ones who got away. The ones who found courage. Mother, Dominic said softly. You don't have to. She told me about Lily Chen, Sarah interrupted. About the girl who wanted to be an artist, who was trying to escape her father's world. Rosa was helping her apply to schools, write essays, believe she could be more than what she'd been born into. She looked at Chen then, and her eyes were devastating. Your daughter died trying to be good. My daughter died trying to help her. And you two have been killing each other over ghosts ever since, using women like me and Emma as weapons because you're too broken to see another way. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of the harbor. I have Alzheimer's, Sarah said. Most days I don't remember my own name, but I remember this. I gave testimony to the FBI 6 months ago. Had a lawyer document everything while I still could. Names, dates, operations, everything you did, Marcus, everything my family did. It's in a safe deposit box with instructions to release it if anything happens to me or my sons. You're bluffing, Chen said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I'm dying, Sarah replied. What do I have left to lose? She looked at me then. Emma, honey. Take my son and leave. Let Marcus and I finish this conversation alone. We're both old enough to know how these stories end. I'm not leaving you, Dominic said. You are, Sarah replied, and her voice held all the authority of the mother she'd been before the disease. Because I'm choosing, not you, not Emma, me. And I choose for you to live. Chen's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and something changed in his face. Federal agents, he said quietly. Outside the warehouse. Sarah's lawyer apparently programmed a timer. If she didn't check in this morning, the files release automatically. He looked at Dominic's mother with something like admiration. You magnificent bitch. You planned this whole thing. I had help, Sarah said, and smiled at me. Emma's friend from the hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen, your niece. She helped me document everything in exchange for immunity. Turns out she was tired of cleaning up your messes, too. The sound of sirens now, getting closer. Chen's men were moving, preparing to run, but Chen just stood there, looking at Sarah with an expression I couldn't name. Loss, maybe, or recognition that he'd finally been beaten by someone who had nothing left to lose. Tell May I'm sorry, Sarah said to him. Tell her I understand why she helped you, and that I forgive her. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. None of us do, but maybe that's the point. Marco grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the exit. Dominic hesitated, looking at his mother. Go, she said. Live better than we did. Love better than we did. Be better than all of us. We ran. Out of the warehouse, into Marco's car, away from the sirens and the men and the choice that Sarah had made for all of us. Dominic was silent beside me, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away. Because I understood now. We'd both been given the same gift. The chance to live with the consequences of other people's courage instead of our own cowardice. The chance to be better than the ghosts that haunted us. 6 months later, I was working the night shift at a free clinic in Cambridge when Dominic walked through the door. Not as a patient, not bleeding or broken or running from someone's bullets. Just walking in at 2 a.m. with coffee from the place down the street that knew how I liked it. Cream, no sugar. Hot enough to burn. He'd lost weight. Not much, but enough that I could see it in his face, the way his shirts hung differently on his shoulders. His hair was longer, touching his collar, and he had the beginning of a beard that made him look less like a mafia boss and more like a graduate student who'd forgotten to sleep. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, not looking up from the chart I was updating. "Marco's orders. Marco works for me." Worked. Past tense. "I heard he's running security for a tech startup now. Legitimate. Boring. Making 3 times what you paid him." Dominic set the coffee on the desk beside me. Sat down in the plastic chair across from my makeshift station, a folding table in what used to be a restaurant, surrounded by people who needed help and couldn't afford the emergency room. "How's your mother?" I asked. "Dead. 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia." She went peacefully. Didn't recognize me at the end, but the nurse said she smiled when I read to her. I looked up then, saw the grief etched into his face. Different from before, not the sharp, violent grief that had driven him to build an empire. Something softer, more like acceptance. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She got to choose how her story ended. That's more than most people get. We sat in silence while around us the clinic moved through its midnight rhythm. A kid with an asthma attack, a homeless man with an infected wound, a woman who wouldn't say how she got the bruises but let me examine them anyway, let me give her the phone numbers she probably wouldn't call. This was my life now. After the FBI arrested Marcus Chen, after his organization crumbled, after Dominic dismantled his own empire piece by piece and disappeared, I'd gone back to nursing, but not to Mass General, where Dr. Sarah Chen had been arrested as an accomplice, and the board had spent 3 months investigating everyone who'd ever worked with her. Instead, I'd found this place, a clinic that ran on donations and desperation, where people came when they had nowhere else to go, where I could knock on doors and actually help the people screaming behind them. "Rachel's pregnant," I said, because silence with Dominic had always been dangerous, had always led to truths neither of us was ready for. Due in March. She's hoping for a boy this time. And Lily, starting 3rd grade, has a new obsession with dinosaurs, wants to be a paleontologist. Kids that age want to be everything. She wants to dig up the past and make sense of it. I think she'll be good at that. Dominic smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. The real smile I'd only seen in the photo with Rosa, the one that made him look young and unbroken. "I testified," he said, "at Chen's trial. Told them everything. Lily, the warehouse, the men I killed. All of it. I know. I watched. You were there? In the gallery, back row. You looked right at me once, but I don't think you saw me. I see you now." The words hung between us, heavy with everything we'd survived, everything we'd lost, everything we'd somehow managed to keep. "They offered me a deal," Dominic continued. "Reduced sentence. 5 years. But I told them I wanted to do it right. Take responsibility for what I'd done. And judge gave me 10 years, suspended to 3 with good behavior, 18 months in minimum security, followed by probation and community service. I got out last week. I set down my pen, really looked at him, at the man who'd once sent people back in pieces, who'd built an empire on revenge and grief, who'd somehow found his way to the other side of his own destruction and decided to live there. "Why are you here, Dominic?" "Because I promised my mother I'd be better. And better looks like apologizing to the woman whose life I destroyed because she was brave enough to knock on my door. You didn't destroy my life. I took your freedom, your apartment, your sense of safety. I made you complicit in things you never should have seen. You also kept my sister alive. Taught me how to survive in a world I didn't know existed. Showed me what it looks like to carry impossible grief and keep moving anyway." I stood up, walked around the table, and sat in the chair next to him, close enough to touch but not touching. The way we'd been on the balcony that first night, 2 people circling each other carefully, trying to figure out if they were predator and prey or something more complicated. "I don't forgive you," I said, "because there's nothing to forgive. You didn't kidnap me. You didn't force me to stay. I made choices, same as you. Some of them were smart, some of them were stupid, but they were mine. Emma, and I don't need your apology. What I need is for you to tell me why you're really here at 2 a.m. with coffee that's going to be cold by the time I can drink it." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the truth written in every line of his face. "Because I've been to 12 different cities in 6 months," he said. "Tried to build a new life in everyone. And all I could think about was you. Working night shifts, knocking on doors, saving people who everyone else has written off. That's not a reason. It's the only reason I have. A patient called for me, the woman with the bruises, ready to leave, asking if I had a card. I went to her, gave her my personal cell number the way I always did, told her to call any time, day or night, that I'd be there. When I came back, Dominic was still sitting there, waiting. I'm doing community service at a halfway house, he said, teaching financial literacy to people getting out of prison, helping them understand how to budget, save, avoid the loan sharks who target them the second they're released. That's good. It's boring as hell, but it's honest. And some days that feels like enough. He stood up, and I thought he was leaving. Thought this was goodbye, a final closure to a story that had almost destroyed us both. But instead, he held out his hand. Walk with me, just around the block. And then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. I looked at his hand, thought about all the things those hands had done, the violence and the protection, the way they'd shaken when he showed me Rose's photo, the way they'd held mine in the back of Marco's car while we ran from the warehouse. I took it. We walked through Cambridge at 2:30 in the morning, past closed shops and students stumbling home from parties, past homeless encampments and all-night diners. The city was quieter than Boston, gentler somehow, the kind of place where you could disappear if you wanted to, or find yourself if you were brave enough. I have an apartment in Somerville, Dominic said, studio, walking distance from the halfway house. There's a coffee shop downstairs that makes terrible espresso, but the owner's trying to stay clean, and I'm his only regular customer. Sounds lonely? It is. But I'm learning that lonely and alone aren't the same thing. We stopped at a park, just a small square of grass and benches where people brought their dogs during the day, empty now except for us and the streetlights. I don't know how to be normal, Emma. Don't know how to date or have a relationship that isn't built on crisis and survival. Don't know if I deserve that after everything I've done. He turned to face me, and in the yellow light from the street lamp, he looked impossibly young, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. But I know that when I think about who I want to become, you're there. Not as the woman I saved or the witness I protected, but as the person who saw the worst parts of me and decided I was still worth sitting next to. My heart was hammering. I'd spent 6 months telling myself I was over this, over him, that the connection we'd forged had been trauma bonding and adrenaline and the kind of intensity that doesn't survive normal life. But standing there in the park at 3 a.m, I knew I'd been lying. I don't want to be saved, I said. Don't want to be protected or kept safe or put in a pretty cage while you fight battles I can't see. I know. And I don't want the man you were, the empire builder. The one who solved problems with violence because it was easier than being vulnerable. I know that too. What I want, I said slowly, figuring it out as I spoke, is the man who reads to his mother even when she doesn't remember him, who teaches financial literacy at a halfway house, who shows up at free clinics with coffee because he can't figure out how to just ask if someone wants to see him again. Dominic smiled, sad and hopeful at the same time. I can be that man. I'm trying to be that man. But I need you to know it's going to be messy, that I'm going to fuck up. That there are days when I wake up and don't know who I am without the empire and the power and the fear. Good, I said, because I wake up some days and don't know who I am without the adrenaline, without checking over my shoulder, without Marco in the parking garage and men watching my apartment and the weight of knowing people want to kill me. So we're both broken. We're both healing. There's a difference. I stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Different now, softer. Something he'd probably bought at a regular store instead of having custom made. Close enough to see the scar through his eyebrow, the gray in his eyes, the exhaustion of 6 months spent trying to atone. Here's what I want, I said. Sunday morning coffee. Not at 3 a.m. when you're afraid to ask for what you need. Actual dates where we go to movies and argue about the endings, fighting about whose turn it is to do dishes, the boring, normal, beautiful shit that people do when they're trying to build a life together. I can do that. And therapy. For both of us. Because we've both seen too much to pretend we don't need help processing it. Already have a therapist. Court mandated. She's terrifying and I think she hates me, but she's good at her job. Perfect. We can compare notes. He laughed. Really laughed. And then he was kissing me. Not desperate, not urgent. Just soft and careful and asking a question I'd been too afraid to answer for 6 months. I kissed him back. With all the grief and hope and impossibility of two people who'd survived something that should have killed them, who'd chosen each other not because it was easy, but because it was true. When we pulled apart, the sky was starting to lighten. Dawn coming to Cambridge. A new day in a new life. I have to get back to the clinic, I said. My shift ends at 7. Can I pick you up? Take you to breakfast? The diner on Mass Ave. 7:15. And Dominic? Yeah? Don't be late. I've seen what you're capable of when you're late. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and walked away. I watched him go. Not a mafia boss, not an empire builder. Just a man trying to figure out how to be better, trying to earn the kind of redemption that can't be bought or taken, only lived one ordinary day at a time. When I got back to the clinic, my supervisor was waiting. New patient in exam 3. Says she's been hiding for 6 months, but she's ready to press charges. Asked for you specifically. I looked at the chart. Mei Lin, Marcus Chen's daughter, the Jane Doe I'd saved, who'd helped set everything in motion. I knocked on the door. Heard a voice say, "Come in." She was thinner than I remembered. Scared. But her eyes were clear, determined. The eyes of someone who'd decided to stop running. "Hi," I said. "I'm Emma. I think we have a lot to talk about." She smiled. Weak but genuine. I think we do too. And sitting there in the exam room with Mei Lin, helping her catalog her injuries and document her story and prepare for the battle ahead, I understood something I'd been too busy surviving to see. This was the life I'd been building since the night I knocked on Dominic's door. Not the one where I stayed safe and invisible and small, but the one where I opened doors and helped people scream and refused to look away, even when looking away was easier. The one where I chose courage over comfort, connection over isolation, love over fear. Outside, the sun rose over Cambridge. Inside, I held Mei Lin's hand while she told me everything. And somewhere in Somerville, Dominic was probably making terrible espresso and planning our breakfast date and trying to figure out how to be the man his mother had believed he could be. We were all just trying to be better than our ghosts. And maybe, I thought, that was enough. Maybe it was everything. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.